Hello everyone, welcome back to the new video of AP Knowledge Point, the mountain above Dras. Imagine standing in the Dras Valley, you look upward. Above you rises a massive jagged mountain. Its summit disappears into the clouds. Its rocky slopes are steep. Its ridgelines are exposed, and somewhere near the top, enemy soldiers are waiting. This is Tiger Hill. In the summer of 1999, this mountain became one of the most fiercely contested objectives of the Kargil War. It dominated the surrounding terrain. It offered observation over the Dras Valley, and its position gave the enemy an important advantage over India's routes below. For the Indian Army, Tiger Hill was not simply another peak, it was a symbol of the enormous challenge standing between India and victory. And on the night of the final assault, Indian soldiers would attempt something extraordinary. They would climb terrain that appeared almost impossible to attack. In darkness at extreme altitude under enemy fire. This is the story of Tiger Hill. After point 5140, the capture of point 5140 had changed the momentum of the war. Indian forces were steadily pushing the infiltrators back, but the battle was far from over. Several strategically important heights remained under enemy control, and among them stood Tiger Hill. Its importance came from its commanding position above the Dras sector. From elevated ground, an occupying force could observe movements below and threaten important routes. For India, leaving Tiger Hill in enemy hands was unacceptable. The mountain had to be recaptured. But there was a problem. Tiger Hill was not an easy objective. The terrain itself seemed designed to protect the defenders. A fortress of rock. At high altitude, mountains become more than obstacles. They become weapons. A defender positioned above an approaching force can observe movement from a tremendous advantage. The attacker, meanwhile, must climb upward. There is a little cover. There are steep rock faces. There are narrow ridges, and there is nowhere to hide from the weather. At these elevations, the human body itself becomes a limitation. Oxygen is scarce. The cold is relentless. Every soldier carries weapons, ammunition, and essential equipment. A climb that would be exhausting at sea level becomes dramatically harder here. And now imagine doing it while knowing that someone is watching from above. That was the challenge facing the Indian Army. The plan. The obvious route was also the most dangerous. A direct approach would expose the attackers to enemy observation and fire. So Indian commanders looked for another possibility. If the enemy expected an attack from one direction, could Indian soldiers approach from somewhere unexpected? The answer would involve difficult movement across the mountains, less accessible approaches. The operation required coordination. Infantry would have to move carefully. Artillery would have to provide support. Positions would have to be isolated. And the final assault would depend on soldiers reaching places the defenders believed were extremely difficult to climb. The plan was not simple go up the mountain. It was find a way to make the impossible climb possible. The night approach. As darkness descended over the mountains, the battlefield changed. The peaks disappeared into blackness. The temperature dropped. Visibility became extremely limited. For the assault teams, darkness offered both danger and opportunity. It concealed their movement, but it also concealed the terrain. One wrong step could send a soldier sliding down the rocky slope. The soldiers moved carefully, slowly, silently, every meter mattered. Above them was the objective, behind them were their comrades, and ahead enemy positions. The climb continued. The mountain fights back. The enemy eventually detected movement. The silence was broken. Gunfire erupted across the mountainside. The darkness suddenly became filled with the flashes. Explosions illuminated the rocks. The attacking soldiers had to continue moving while under fire. Some sought whatever cover the terrain provided. Others continued climbing. The battle was no longer simply about weapons, it was a contest of endurance. Could the attackers maintain momentum? Could they reach the defensive positions? Could they survive the climb? Every minute mattered. Artillery from below. Far below the summit, Indian artillery continued its work. The Bofors guns had already demonstrated their importance throughout the conflict. Their powerful shells could reach enemy positions on high mountain ridges. Artillery fire disrupted defensive positions and helped create opportunities for infantry movement. From the valley, the guns thundered, above the soldiers climbed. The battlefield had become a coordinated effort between those fighting on the mountain and those supporting them from below. The objective was simple: keep the pressure on. The final climb. Now came the most dangerous part. The soldiers were getting closer. The higher they climbed, the more exposed they became. The terrain narrowed. The enemy positions were closer. There was no easy way back. The assault teams pushed forward. Some soldiers climbed using ropes, others used natural rock formations. The darkness concealed them whenever possible, but the enemy continued resisting. The final approach became a brutal struggle. Grenades, small arms fire, explosions, rock, snow, smoke, and soldiers moving forward despite exhaustion. The summit. Then the balance began to shift. Indian troops reached critical positions around the summit. Enemy defensive positions were progressively neutralized. The fighting continued through the night, but the Indian assault was succeeding. The mountain that had seemed almost impossible to capture was finally being taken. And then came the moment the entire country had been waiting for. The Indian tricolour was raised over Tiger Hill. Tiger Hill had been recaptured. July 4, 1999. On 4th July 1999, India announced the capture of Tiger Hill. The news traveled rapidly across the country. For millions of Indians, the name Tiger Hill immediately became associated with the courage of the soldiers fighting in the Kargil mountains. But military victory is never simply a moment of celebration. Every position captured had a human cost. Every mountain carried the memory of soldiers who had fought there. And behind the headlines were families waiting for news from the front. Some would receive messages of victory, others would receive news that would change their lives forever. Why Tiger Hill mattered. The significance of Tiger Hill extended beyond its symbolic value. Its capture strengthened India's position in the Dras sector and further weakened the defensive network established by the infiltrators. The Indian army was steadily reclaiming strategically important heights. The momentum was now shifting. Tololing had fallen. Point 5140 had fallen. Tiger Hill had fallen, but another battle was about to produce one of the most famous stories of the entire war. The story of Point 4875 and the officer whose name would become inseparable from that mountain, Captain Vikram Batra, the hero who kept moving forward. Captain Vikram Batra had already become famous after Point 5140, but the story did not end there. His unit was assigned another difficult mission in the Mushkov Valley. The objective was Point 4875. The mountain was strategically important. The fighting would be intense, and once again, Captain Batra would lead from the front. This time, however, the battle would demand the ultimate sacrifice. Tiger Hill had been captured. The tricolour was flying. India had achieved one of the most important victories of the Kargil War. But the war still had heroes waiting to be remembered. In the Mushko Valley, another battle was beginning, and at its center stood a young captain who had already become a national symbol of courage. His name was Vikram Batra. The next episode, point 4875, Captain Vikram Batra, Ye Dil Mange More, a battle where courage would meet sacrifice and where one officer's final stand would become part of Indian military history. If you want to know what happened at point 4875, and if you want to understand the battle behind the legend, and if you want to hear the complete story of Captain Vikram Batra's final battle, don't stop the series here. Subscribe to AP Knowledge Point because the next episode is one of the most powerful chapters of the entire Kargil War. Point 4875, Captain Vikram Batra, the final battle. Jai Hind.